The morning sun cast long shadows across forward operating base Hammer as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her medical kit for the third time. The weight felt familiar against her hip, a constant reminder of her role as the unit's primary combat medic. Around her, the soldiers of Alpha Company prepared for another patrol into the restless valleys of Afghanistan's Kunar province. The chatter was typical, jokes about the questionable quality of breakfast MREs, complaints about the heat, and the usual ribbing that kept morale up in a place where death lurked behind every ridge. Maria had heard it all before during her 18 months at Hammer. At 26, she was older than most of the riflemen, though younger than the senior NCOs who ran the show. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her uniform bore the same dust, and whereas everyone else's, but there was something different about her presence. While other soldiers carried themselves with the swagger of warriors, Maria moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had saved lives under fire. Her fellow soldiers respected her medical skills, but few truly understood the depth of her training. The thing about being a medic in the Army was that everyone assumed they knew what you could do. Patch up wounds, start IVs, maybe perform some basic emergency procedures under pressure. What they didn't know about Maria Santos was that she had spent 2 years before her deployment training at some of the most demanding medical facilities in the country. She had worked trauma surgery rotations at major hospitals, learning to operate under conditions that would break most people. More importantly, she had completed specialized combat training that went far beyond the standard medical curriculum. Captain Johnson gathered the patrol around the operations tent, his voice cutting through the morning noise. "We're heading to the village of Kerez today. Intelligence suggests there's been increased Taliban movement in the area, but nothing concrete. Standard hearts and minds mission, we check on the locals, distribute some humanitarian supplies, and show the flag." He pointed to various positions on the tactical maps spread across the hood of a Humvee. "Santos, you'll be with 3rd Squad. There's reports of some sick children in the village, so bring your full medical kit." Maria nodded, automatically running through her mental checklist of supplies. Antibiotics, wound dressings, pain medication, emergency surgical instruments. Her kit was always prepared for anything from a scraped knee to a sucking chest wound. What the captain and the others didn't know was that her kit also contained several items that weren't standard medical issue. Hidden beneath the legitimate medical supplies were components that could be assembled into something far more lethal if the situation demanded it. The convoy rolled out 30 minutes later, 4 up-armored Humvees carrying 28 soldiers into the mountainous terrain that had swallowed so many American patrols over the past decade. Maria rode in the 3rd vehicle, seated across from Private Williams, a 19-year-old from Ohio who still flinched every time their vehicle hit a pothole. The kid had been in country for only 6 weeks, and his nervousness was written across his face like a neon sign. "First time to Kerez?" Maria asked, her voice gentle but authoritative. Williams nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Sergeant Mitchell says it's usually pretty quiet there." "Usually is," Maria agreed. "But you keep your head on a swivel anyway. The quiet ones can surprise you." She had learned that lesson the hard way during her 2nd month in country, when what should have been a routine medical evacuation had turned into a 6-hour firefight. 3 soldiers had been wounded that day, and Maria had kept all of them alive while bullets flew overhead. The village of Kerez sat in a valley surrounded by steep ridges covered in sparse vegetation and rocky outcroppings. It was the kind of terrain that made every soldier nervous. Too many places for an enemy to hide, too many angles of approach to cover effectively. The village itself was typical of rural Afghanistan. Mud brick compounds connected by narrow alleys, with flat rooftops that provided excellent firing positions for anyone with hostile intentions. As the convoy approached the village outskirts, Maria felt the familiar tightening in her stomach that came with entering potentially dangerous territory. Her training had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about today felt different. The usual signs of life in an Afghan village were subdued. Normally, children would run alongside the vehicles, hoping for candy or school supplies. Today, the streets were unusually empty. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the third squad leader, seemed to notice it too. Over the radio, his voice carried a note of concern. All stations, this is 3-6. Village seems quiet today. Keep your eyes open. The convoy parked in the village center, near a small marketplace that doubled as the community's gathering point. As the soldiers dismounted and began establishing a security perimeter, Maria gathered her medical kit and approached a small crowd of villagers who had begun to emerge from their compounds. An elderly man, apparently the village elder, stepped forward with the kind of measured dignity that came from dealing with foreign soldiers for years. Through an interpreter, the elder explained that several children had fallen ill with what appeared to be severe stomach problems. Maria followed him to a nearby compound where she found 6 children, ranging in age from 3 to 12, all showing signs of dehydration and fever. As she began her examination, she quickly realized that this was likely a case of contaminated water, serious, but treatable with the right antibiotics and rehydration therapy. For the next 2 hours, Maria worked steadily, treating not just the sick children, but several adults who had been too proud or nervous to ask for help initially. Word spread through the village that the American medic was skilled and gentle, and soon she had a steady stream of patients with various ailments. A farmer with an infected wound on his hand, an elderly woman with severe arthritis, a teenager with what appeared to be a broken bone that had never healed properly. While Maria worked, the rest of Alpha Company maintained security and distributed humanitarian supplies. The mood was relaxed, almost routine. Soldiers shared MREs with curious children, took pictures to send home, and tried to communicate with the locals using a mixture of broken Pashto and hand gestures. It was the kind of mission that reminded everyone why they were there, not just to fight, but to help build something better. Private Williams had relaxed considerably since arriving in the village. He was playing a simple game with several Afghan children, using rocks and lines drawn in the dirt. His laughter carried across the village center, mixing with the voices of locals and soldiers in a sound that seemed almost peaceful. Maria smiled as she watched him, remembering her own first weeks in country, when everything had seemed so foreign and threatening. "Santos, how much longer you need?" Lieutenant Rodriguez approached her makeshift clinic, his voice casual but alert. "Maybe another 30 minutes, Maria replied, finishing a bandage on a young boy's arm. "I want to make sure everyone who needs attention gets it." Rodriguez nodded and moved away to check on his other soldiers. The security perimeter was well established, with soldiers positioned at key intersections and vantage points throughout the village. Everything appeared normal, routine even, but Maria had learned during her deployment that normal could change to deadly in a matter of seconds. As she worked on her final patient, an infant with signs of malnutrition, Maria noticed something that made her pause. The baby's mother, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 20, kept glancing nervously toward the ridgeline to the north. It was subtle, almost unconscious, but Maria's training had taught her to notice such things. When people were nervous about something specific, they tended to look in that direction without realizing it. Maria followed the woman's gaze to the ridge, studying the terrain with the analytical eye of someone who had survived multiple combat deployments. The ridge was perhaps 800 meters away, covered with the same scrub brush and rock formations that characterize the entire region. To most observers, it would look empty, unremarkable, but Maria noticed something that made her blood run cold. There, barely visible among the rocks, was the faint glint of metal catching the afternoon sun. It was there for just a moment, then gone, but it was enough. Someone was on that ridge, and they had equipment that reflected light. Equipment like rifle scopes or spotting devices. Maria continued treating the infant, her hands steady and her voice calm, but her mind was racing. The woman's nervous glances, the unusually quiet village, the empty streets when they had arrived. It all made sense now. The villagers had known something was coming. They had tried to warn the Americans in the only way they could, by staying hidden and hoping the soldiers would notice the unusual atmosphere. She finished with the infant and handed the child back to its mother, speaking quietly in the few words of Pashto she had learned. "Danger comes soon." The woman's eyes widened with fear, but she nodded almost imperceptibly. Then she gathered her child and hurried away, disappearing into one of the compound buildings with the speed of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Maria looked around at her fellow soldiers, still relaxed, and going about their duties with the casual efficiency of veterans. Williams was still playing with the children. Sergeant Mitchell was sharing a cigarette with one of the interpreters. Lieutenant Rodriguez was talking on a radio, probably giving a routine status update to company headquarters. She had perhaps minutes, maybe less, before all hell broke loose. The question was how to warn everyone without causing a panic that might endanger the villagers. Maria had trained for situations like this, but training was different from the real thing. This was the moment when her extensive medical knowledge would have to work alongside skills that few medics possessed. Moving casually, but purposefully, Maria approached Lieutenant Rodriguez. "Sir, I need to speak with you privately." Rodriguez looked up from his radio, noting something in her tone that made him pay attention. "What is it, Santos?" "We have a problem. There's movement on the northern ridge, and the villagers are acting like they expect trouble. I think we're about to be hit." The lieutenant's expression changed instantly from relaxed to alert. He was young, maybe 24, but he had been in enough firefights to trust his medic's instincts. "How sure are you?" "Sure enough that we need to start moving people to cover right now." Rodriguez nodded and keyed his radio, his voice calm but urgent. "All stations, this is 3-6. Possible threat developing to the north. Begin consolidating positions. Keep it low-key, but be ready." As the word spread through the patrol, Maria could see soldiers subtly shifting their positions, moving closer to cover while trying not to alarm the civilians. The children who had been playing with Williams seemed to sense the change in atmosphere and began drifting away, disappearing into their family compounds with the instinctive understanding that danger was coming. Maria returned to her medical kit, but instead of packing it away, she began rearranging the contents in a very specific pattern. Hidden beneath the legitimate medical supplies were components that she had hoped never to use. Small, carefully designed items that could be assembled into tools of war rather than healing. Her superiors knew about her additional training, but they had never expected her to use it. The first shot came from a northern ridge at exactly 1,347 hours, a high-velocity round that shattered the windshield of the lead Humvee and sent everyone diving for cover. The crack of the rifle was followed immediately by the distinctive chatter of AK-47s from multiple positions, and suddenly, the quiet village erupted into a battlefield. "Contact north! Contact north!" Rodriguez's voice cut through the noise as soldiers scrambled for defensive positions behind vehicles, buildings, and anything else that might stop a bullet. Maria found herself pressed against the wall of a compound building, her medical kit beside her, and her mind automatically switching from healer to warrior. Around her, Alpha Company was responding with a disciplined fire that came from months of training and experience. But she could tell from the volume of incoming fire that they were facing a significant enemy force, possibly more than they could handle with their current positioning. Private Williams stumbled and fell near her position, blood streaming from a wound on his leg. Without thinking, Maria left her cover and dragged him to safety, her medical training taking over even as bullets cracked overhead. The wound was serious, but not life-threatening, a through shot that had missed the major blood vessels. "You're going to be okay," she told Williams as she applied pressure to the wound. "Just stay down and keep pressure on this bandage." But even as she worked to save Williams, Maria's tactical mind was analyzing the situation. The enemy had chosen their positions well, using the high ground to dominate the village. Alpha Company was pinned down with limited options for maneuver. The vehicles were too exposed to be useful for evacuation, and air support was at least 20 minutes away. That was when Maria Santos made a decision that would change everything about how her fellow soldiers saw her. She opened her medical kit and began assembling components that had nothing to do with healing wounds. The sound of gunfire echoed off the compound walls as Maria Santos crouched behind a low stone barrier, her hands working with practiced precision. From her medical kit, she withdrew items that looked innocent enough. Metal tubes that could have been instrument cases, small electronic components that resembled medical monitoring devices, and polymer pieces that might have been parts for a field surgical kit. But as she assembled them with swift, efficient movements, they transformed into something entirely different. Within 90 seconds, Maria had constructed a precision rifle system that would have impressed any special operations sniper. The weapon was a masterpiece of engineering, designed to be broken down into components that could pass inspection as medical equipment. Every piece served a dual purpose, camouflaged within the legitimate tools of her trade. The scope looked like a diagnostic instrument, the barrel appeared to be a specialized medical probe, and the stock could have been mistaken for a portable examination light. Private Williams stared at her with wide eyes, temporarily forgetting about his wounded leg. "Doc, what the hell is that?" "Something I hoped I'd never have to use," Maria replied, checking the weapon's action with the smooth motions of someone who had trained extensively with this exact system. "Keep pressure on that wound and stay low." Through the scope, Maria could see the enemy positions clearly for the first time. There were at least 12 fighters spread across the northern ridge, well positioned behind natural cover, and firing down into the village with tactical discipline that suggested military training. Several appeared to be foreign fighters, possibly Chechens or Arabs, mixed with local Taliban. They had chosen their ambush site perfectly, with clear fields of fire and multiple escape routes. What worried Maria most was the heavy machine gun position she could see near the center of the enemy line. The PCAM was being served by a two-man crew and was putting devastating fire on Alpha Company's positions. Every time one of her fellow soldiers tried to move, the machine gun would traverse and force them back into cover. It was a classic fixing operation, pin the enemy in place while other elements maneuvered for a decisive attack. Lieutenant Rodriguez was trying to coordinate a response, but his options were limited. "Santos, how's Williams? He'll live, but he needs evacuation," Maria called back, never taking her eyes off the enemy positions. She was tracking the machine gun crew, noting their pattern of fire and the brief moments when they paused to change ammunition belts or adjust their position. "Roger, we're working on getting air support, but it's going to be at least 15 minutes. 15 minutes might as well have been 15 hours in a firefight like this." Maria could see Taliban fighters moving along the ridge, trying to flank Alpha Company's position. Once they achieved envelopment, the Americans would be fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. Someone needed to disrupt the enemy's plan, and Maria was probably the only person in the unit with the skills and equipment to do it. She selected her first target carefully, the machine gunner who was causing the most problems for her unit. The man was approximately 600 meters away, positioned behind a cluster of rocks that provided excellent protection from direct frontal assault. But Maria's position gave her a slight angle that exposed a small portion of his torso when he leaned forward to sight his weapon. The crosshairs settled on her target as Maria controlled her breathing, just as she had been trained to do during countless hours of practice. Her finger found the trigger, applying pressure steadily until the weapon fired with a sound that was barely audible over the ongoing firefight. The bullet traveled across the valley in less than a second, striking the machine gunner's center mass and dropping him instantly. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The heavy machine gun fell silent, and Maria could see the assistant gunner frantically trying to take over the weapon while also dealing with his wounded partner. In those few seconds of disruption, Sergeant Mitchell was able to move his squad to a better position, gaining valuable ground toward one of the compound buildings. But Maria's work was far from finished. Even as she targeted the assistant gunner, she was aware of movement to her left. 3 Taliban fighters were working their way down the ridge, using the terrain to mask their approach. If they reached the village perimeter, they would be able to attack Alpha Company from close range with grenades and automatic weapons. She shifted her aim to the lead fighter, a bearded man carrying an AK-47 and what appeared to be several fragmentation grenades attached to his vest. The shot was more challenging. The target was moving, partially concealed by vegetation, and the range was nearly 700 meters. Maria led the target slightly, compensating for his movement and the bullet's travel time, then squeezed the trigger. The Taliban fighter dropped immediately, his body tumbling down the rocky slope. His two companions dove for cover, confused and frightened by the accurate fire that seemed to be coming from nowhere. They had expected to face American soldiers armed with standard infantry weapons, not precision rifle fire that could reach out and touch them at long range. Where the hell is that shooting coming from? Corporal Davis's voice carried across the battlefield as he tried to identify the source of the devastating sniper fire that was systematically dismantling the enemy attack. Maria didn't respond. She was already tracking her next target, a Taliban commander who was trying to coordinate his fighter's movement using hand signals. The man was smart enough to stay mostly concealed, but Maria caught him during a moment when he exposed himself to give instructions to his subordinates. The bullet found its mark, and suddenly, the enemy's coordinated attack began to fall apart as individual fighters lost direction without their leader's guidance. Private Williams was staring at her in amazement, his earlier shock giving way to awe. "Doc, you're a freaking sniper." Among other things, Maria murmured, working the bolt action and chambering another round. Through the scope, she could see the remaining Taliban fighters beginning to withdraw, realizing that their ambush had turned into a disaster. But she wasn't going to let them escape easily. Each of these fighters who lived would be back another day to attack American patrols or Afghan civilians. She took careful aim at another fleeing fighter, leading him as he bounded from cover to cover up the ridge face. The shot was extremely difficult, a moving target at maximum range, with wind factors to consider and the added complication of shooting uphill. But Maria's training had prepared her for exactly these kinds of challenges. The bullet struck the Taliban fighter just as he thought he had reached safety, sending a clear message to his surviving comrades that nowhere on that ridge was truly safe. Lieutenant Rodriguez had finally spotted her position and was staring at her with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Santos, what the hell are you doing over there?" "My job," Maria replied calmly, continuing to scan for targets. "Just a different part of it than you're used to seeing." The remaining Taliban fighters were in full retreat now, abandoning their carefully prepared positions and fleeing toward the deeper mountains. Maria tracked several of them, but held her fire. They were moving away from the village and no longer posed an immediate threat to her unit. Her mission was to protect her fellow soldiers, not to pursue a retreating enemy beyond the point where they could cause harm. As the gunfire gradually died away, an eerie quiet settled over the village. Alpha Company began the process of consolidating their position and treating their wounded, while Maria quickly disassembled her specialized weapon system and returned the components to their hiding places within her medical kit. Within minutes, there was no evidence that the medical bag had ever contained anything other than standard medical supplies. Captain Johnson's voice crackled over the radio, his tone reflecting both relief and confusion. 3-6, this is 6 actual. What's your status? We heard some kind of precision fire during that engagement. Rodriguez looked at Maria, who was now back in full medic mode, checking on Williams and preparing to treat other wounded soldiers. 6 actual, we had some unexpected support during the engagement. I'll give you a full briefing when we return to base. Understood, 3-6. Air support is en route, but it sounds like you have the situation under control. Prepare for casualty evacuation in approximately 10 minutes. As the adrenaline began to wear off, Maria could feel her fellow soldiers looking at her with a mixture of respect, confusion, and wariness. Word was already spreading through the unit that their medic had somehow produced precision rifle fire that had turned the tide of the battle. But the full extent of her capabilities was still unknown to most of them. Sergeant Mitchell approached her position, his weathered face serious. "Santos, we need to talk when we get back to base. That was some impressive shooting, and I'm wondering what else you haven't told us about your training. Maria nodded, understanding that her secret was out. Roger, Sergeant. We'll have that conversation. She returned her attention to Private Williams, whose leg wound required immediate care before the helicopter arrived. As she worked, cleaning and dressing the wound with the same gentle efficiency that had earned her the unit's trust, Maria reflected on how drastically the day had changed. This morning, she had been just the unit medic, respected for her medical skills, but seen as a non-combatant whose job was to heal rather than fight. Now everything was different. Her fellow soldiers had seen her in action as something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The quiet, competent medic who had saved so many lives during their deployment had revealed herself to be a precision marksman capable of engaging multiple targets at long range with devastating effectiveness. Williams looked up at her as she secured the final bandage around his leg. "Doc, are you really just a medic?" Maria smiled, but there was something in her expression that suggested depths her fellow soldiers were only beginning to discover. "I'm exactly what the Army trained me to be, Williams. Sometimes that means saving lives. Sometimes it means taking them. The important thing is knowing when to do which." The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air as the medical evacuation aircraft arrived to transport the wounded back to larger medical facilities. Maria supervised the loading of Williams and two other soldiers who had been injured during the firefight, providing detailed medical briefings to the flight medics who would continue their care during the flight. As the helicopters disappeared into the distance, Alpha Company prepared for their own return to forward operating base Hammer. The village of Carez was quiet again, its residents emerging cautiously from their compounds to survey the damage from the battle. Several villagers approached Maria with expressions of gratitude, understanding that her actions had prevented the Taliban from overrunning the village and potentially causing civilian casualties. The convoy formed up for the return journey, but the atmosphere was markedly different from the morning patrol. Word had spread through the unit about their medics' unexpected combat performance, and soldiers who had previously seen her as a non-combatant were now viewing her with the respect accorded to proven warriors. The easy camaraderie was still there, but it was tempered with a new awareness that Maria Santos was far more than she had appeared to be. During the ride back to base, Maria could feel the weight of dozens of questions that her fellow soldiers wanted to ask, but weren't sure how to phrase. She had revealed capabilities that went far beyond standard medical training, and everyone was trying to understand how their quiet, dedicated medic had become a precision marksman capable of influencing the outcome of a major firefight. Corporal Davis, riding in the same vehicle, finally voiced what everyone was thinking. "Santos, how long have you been able to do what you did back there?" Maria considered her answer carefully. She had spent months building trust with these soldiers, earning their confidence through her dedication to their medical needs and her willingness to risk her life to save theirs. Now she had to help them understand that everything they thought they knew about her was incomplete but not false. "I've had specialized training beyond the standard medical curriculum," she said finally. "The Army has some programs that combine medical skills with other capabilities. The idea is to create personnel who can function effectively in multiple roles when the situation demands it." It was true, as far as it went, but Maria knew it didn't begin to explain the full extent of her background. The reality was far more complex, involving training programs that few soldiers even knew existed. She had been selected for specialized preparation that turned dedicated medical professionals into something approaching special operations capabilities. The convoy reached forward operating base Hammer just as the sun was beginning to set behind the mountains. As the vehicles pulled through the main gate, Maria could see that word of the day's events had already reached the base. Officers and NCOs were waiting near the motor pool, their expressions suggesting that some difficult conversations lay ahead. Captain Johnson approached her vehicle as soon as it stopped, his face serious but not unfriendly. "Santos, I need to see you in my office in 30 minutes. Bring your medical kit." Maria nodded, understanding the implications. Her specialized weapon system would be discovered during inspection, and she would have to provide explanations that would forever change her relationship with Alpha Company. The days of being seen as just a medic were over. Now her fellow soldiers would have to come to terms with the fact that they had been serving alongside someone whose capabilities far exceeded anything in their experience. As she walked toward her quarters to prepare for the inevitable questioning, Maria reflected on the choices that had brought her to this moment. She had volunteered for specialized training because she believed that saving lives sometimes required taking them. Today had proven that belief correct, but it had also exposed her to scrutiny that would force her to reveal truths she had hoped to keep hidden. Captain Johnson's office was sparse, containing only the essential furniture and equipment needed to run a forward operating base. The walls were lined with tactical maps, communication equipment, and the kind of administrative materials that kept the combat unit functioning in hostile territory. Maria sat across from her commanding officer, her medical kit placed on the desk between them, waiting for the conversation that would define the rest of her deployment. Johnson was a career infantry officer, 32 years old with 2 previous deployments and a reputation for taking care of his soldiers. He had earned Alpha Company's respect through competent leadership and a willingness to share the risks that came with combat operations. But the events of the afternoon had presented him with a situation unlike anything in his experience. "Santos, I'm going to be direct with you," Johnson began, his voice measured and professional. "Lieutenant Rodriguez briefed me on what happened in Keres today. According to multiple witnesses, you engaged and neutralized several enemy combatants at long range using precision rifle fire. This was not the action of a standard combat medic." Maria met his gaze steadily. "No, sir, it wasn't. I'm also told that you produced this rifle system from your medical kit, which suggests a level of preparation that goes well beyond anything in our unit's standard operating procedures." Johnson gestured toward the medical bag. "Would you mind showing me what we're dealing with?" Without hesitation, Maria opened her kit and began removing the specialized components, assembling them with the same practiced efficiency she had demonstrated in the village. Within minutes, the precision rifle system lay complete on Johnson's desk, its advanced design clearly visible in the office lighting. Johnson examined the weapon carefully, noting its sophisticated construction and the way each component had been disguised within legitimate medical equipment. "This is some serious hardware, Santos. Where did you get it? And more importantly, where did you learn to use it like you did today?" "Sir, I'm part of a specialized training program that isn't widely known within the conventional army," Maria explained. "It's designed to create medical personnel who can function in multiple roles when tactical situations require it. The program is classified, but my commanding officers are aware of my additional capabilities." Johnson leaned back in his chair, processing this information. "Are you telling me that the Army has been training combat medics to function as precision marksmen?" "Among other things, yes, sir. The thinking is that medical personnel often have the best overview of a tactical situation. We're trained to assess rapidly changing conditions and make critical decisions under extreme stress. Those same skills translate well to other combat applications when necessary." It was true, but Maria knew it was only part of the story. The full truth involved selection processes that identified individuals with exceptional potential, training programs that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible, and missions that required capabilities far beyond anything most soldiers would ever encounter. She had been recruited not just for her medical skills, but for psychological profiles that indicated an unusual combination of compassion and lethality. Johnson studied her for a long moment. "Santos, help me understand something. You've been with Alpha Company for 18 months. In that time, you've saved the lives of at least a dozen soldiers, maybe more. You've earned the trust and respect of everyone in this unit through your dedication to keeping us alive. Why didn't you tell us about these additional capabilities?" "Sir, my primary mission has always been medical support. The other skills are meant to be used only when absolutely necessary, when a tactical situation requires capabilities beyond standard medical care. Today was the first time I felt that threshold had been crossed." Maria's answer was carefully phrased, but she could see that Johnson was intelligent enough to read between the lines. He understood that there were aspects of her background and training that she wasn't authorized to discuss, even with her commanding officer. The military had compartmentalized programs, and some information was shared strictly on a need-to-know basis. All right, Johnson said finally, here's what I need to know for operational purposes. Are there other soldiers in Alpha Company who have similar training? No, sir. As far as I know, I'm the only one. Can you perform these functions while still maintaining your medical duties? Yes, sir. The two skill sets are actually complementary in many ways. Johnson nodded slowly. Santos, what you did today saved lives and potentially prevented Alpha Company from being overrun by a numerically superior enemy force. I'm not going to second-guess your decision to engage those targets, but I need to understand how this affects our future operations. Maria had anticipated this question. Sir, I would recommend that my additional capabilities be treated as a resource to be used when conventional tactics are insufficient. I'm still a medic first, and that should remain my primary role. But if we face situations where precision fires could make the difference between mission success and failure, I'm prepared to provide that capability. The captain reached for his phone and dialed a secure number. This is Johnson at FOB Hammer. I need to speak with Colonel Martinez immediately. Yes, I understand he's busy, but this is regarding unusual capabilities that were employed during today's contact in Keres. While Johnson waited for the call to be connected, Maria remained at attention, understanding that the next few minutes would determine how the rest of her deployment would unfold. Word of her actions would inevitably reach higher command levels, and decisions would be made about how to utilize her unique skill set. Colonel Martinez? Sir, it's Captain Johnson. I need to brief you on some unusual developments during today's patrol. Yes, sir. I'm aware of the program. Understood, sir. We'll implement those protocols immediately. Johnson hung up the phone and looked at Maria with an expression that suggested a significant shift in her operational status. Santos, Colonel Martinez has confirmed that he's aware of your background and training. Effective immediately, you're being assigned additional duties as a designated marksman for Alpha Company. You'll retain your medical responsibilities, but you'll also be expected to provide precision fire support when tactical situations warrant it. Maria nodded, understanding that her role within the unit had fundamentally changed. Yes, sir. What about the rest of the company? How much do they need to know? They know that you have specialized training beyond standard medical capabilities. That's sufficient for now. The details of your background and the specific nature of your equipment remain classified. Johnson's tone became more serious. Santos, I want you to understand something. What happened today has implications beyond just Alpha Company. There are going to be people at higher levels who want to understand exactly what kind of capabilities we have available, and they may want to employ those capabilities in ways that go beyond routine patrol operations. This was what Maria had been expecting and dreading in equal measure. Her specialized training had prepared her for situations far more complex and dangerous than today's firefight. She possessed skills that could be valuable in special operations contexts, behind enemy lines missions, and scenarios that conventional infantry units weren't equipped to handle. But employing those capabilities would mean revealing even more about her background and potentially separating her from the soldiers she had come to care about. Sir, my preference is to remain with Alpha Company and continue supporting the soldiers I've been serving with. They trust me, and I trust them. That kind of unit cohesion is difficult to replace. Johnson smiled slightly. I agree, and I've already made that argument to Colonel Martinez. For now, you'll stay with us, but be prepared for the possibility that special mission requirements might override my preferences. As Maria disassembled her weapon system and returned the components to their concealed positions within her medical kit, she reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed in the span of a single afternoon. This morning, she had been a respected but essentially invisible member of Alpha Company. Tonight, she was a known quantity with capabilities that made her valuable to commanders far above her current unit level. Santos, one more thing, Johnson said as she prepared to leave his office. I want you to conduct some additional training with selected members of Alpha Company. Nothing that compromises operational security, but basic marksmanship improvement and tactical awareness. If we're going to have precision fire capabilities available, I want the rest of the unit to understand how to integrate those capabilities into our standard operations. Yes, sir. I can set up training programs that will improve overall unit effectiveness without revealing classified techniques. As Maria left the captain's office and walked across the base toward her quarters, she could feel the weight of curious stares from her fellow soldiers. Word had spread quickly about the afternoon's events, and everyone was trying to reconcile the quiet, dedicated medic they had known for 18 months with the precision marksman who had single-handedly turned the tide of a major firefight. Sergeant Mitchell was waiting near her quarters, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "Santos, we need to talk." They found a quiet corner of the base where they could speak privately, away from the curious ears of other soldiers. Mitchell was Alpha Company's senior NCO, a veteran with 3 deployments, and the kind of practical experience that made him invaluable in combat situations. If anyone deserved a full explanation, it was him. "Sergeant, I know you have questions about today," Maria began. "Santos, I've been in the Army for 14 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did this afternoon. Those weren't lucky shots or random marksmanship. That was professional-level precision shooting against multiple targets at extended range. I need to understand what we're dealing with here." Maria chose her words carefully. "Sergeant, I have specialized training that goes beyond standard medical education. I can't discuss all the details, but I'm authorized to provide precision fire support when tactical situations require it. Captain Johnson has been briefed on my capabilities, and Colonel Martinez has confirmed my operational status." Mitchell nodded slowly. "All right, I can accept that there are things I don't need to know. But I do need to know how this affects my soldiers and our operations. Are you still the medic who's going to keep my people alive when they get shot?" "Absolutely. That's still my primary mission and my most important responsibility." "Good. Because, Santos, I don't care if you can shoot like Annie Oakley. If you stop being the medic who saved Corporal Davis's life during the IED attack last month, or who kept Private Johnson from bleeding out after that mortar strike, then we have a problem." Maria understood Mitchell's concern. The bond between a medic and the soldiers they served was sacred in the military. Her fellow soldiers needed to know that her additional capabilities wouldn't interfere with her commitment to their medical care and safety. "Sergeant, nothing about my medical duties will change. If anything, having additional ways to protect the unit makes me better at keeping everyone alive." Mitchell studied her face for a moment, then extended his hand. "All right, Santos, I trust you. You've earned that over the past 18 months. Just remember that these soldiers depend on you, and not just for your shooting skills." As they shook hands, Maria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Mitchell's acceptance would go a long way toward helping the rest of Alpha Company adjust to her expanded role. The senior NCO's opinion carried enormous influence with the soldiers, and his endorsement would help maintain unit cohesion during what could have been a difficult transition. Over the next several hours, Maria had similar conversations with other key members of Alpha Company. Lieutenant Rodriguez wanted to understand how her capabilities could be integrated into their tactical planning. Corporal Davis was curious about the training that had produced such unusual skills. Private Williams, still recovering from his leg wound, simply wanted to express his gratitude for the precise fires that had broken up the enemy attack. Each conversation helped establish the new reality of Maria's role within the unit. She was still their medic, still the person they trusted to keep them alive when bullets were flying and bombs were exploding. But now she was also something more, a force multiplier who could engage threats at ranges and with precision that conventional infantry weapons couldn't match. As the sun set over forward operating base hammer, Maria sat in her quarters cleaning her specialized weapon system and reflecting on the day's events. The morning had begun with a routine patrol to a quiet village. It was ending with her cover blown, her secret capabilities exposed, and her role within Alpha Company fundamentally altered. But as she thought about Private Williams's grateful expression, about the Taliban fighters who would never again threaten American patrols or Afghan civilians, about the trust that Captain Johnson and Sergeant Mitchell had placed in her. Maria realized that the day's revelations might ultimately strengthen rather than complicate her relationship with the soldiers she served. She had been trained to save lives and take them, to heal wounds and prevent them, to serve as both protector and warrior when the situation demanded it. Today had been the first time she had been forced to demonstrate the full range of her capabilities, but something told her it wouldn't be the last. The mountains of Afghanistan held many more challenges, and Alpha Company would face them together. With their medic, it was far more than she had initially appeared to be. 3 weeks after the firefight at Carez, Forward Operating Base Hammer received intelligence that would test Maria Santos's dual capabilities in ways none of them had anticipated. The information came through classified channels, filtered down from special operations units operating in the region, and it painted a picture of a developing crisis that conventional forces might not be equipped to handle alone. Major Thompson, the battalion commander, had arrived at FOB Hammer that morning for what was supposed to be a routine inspection and briefing session. Instead, he found himself dealing with intelligence reports that suggested a high-value target was operating from a remote compound deep in Taliban-controlled territory. The target was believed to be a foreign fighter with expertise in improvised explosive devices, responsible for attacks that had killed dozens of American and Afghan forces over the past 6 months. The briefing took place in the base's secure communications facility, with only the most senior officers and NCOs present. Captain Johnson represented Alpha Company, while Sergeant Mitchell provided the enlisted perspective on operational capabilities. Maria had been specifically requested to attend, her specialized skills making her relevant to mission planning in ways that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. The target compound is located in the Karangal Valley, approximately 12 kilometers from the nearest friendly forces, Major Thompson explained, pointing to aerial photographs displayed on a large monitor. Intelligence suggests that the HVT is currently present at the location, but the window of opportunity may be limited. He's been extremely mobile, rarely staying in one place for more than 48 hours. Maria studied the photographs carefully, noting the compound's layout and the surrounding terrain. The building sat on a hillside overlooking a narrow valley, with clear fields of fire in multiple directions and natural escape routes that would make a conventional assault extremely difficult. The approaches were covered by prepared fighting positions, and the entire area showed signs of being heavily fortified. "Sir, what kind of timeline are we looking at?" Captain Johnson asked. "The target is believed to be meeting with local Taliban commanders today and tomorrow. After that, he'll likely move to another location, and we may not get another opportunity like this for months." Major Thompson's expression was grim. The problem is that a conventional assault on this position would require significant resources and would likely result in heavy casualties. The compound is too well defended for a direct approach. Sergeant Mitchell leaned forward, studying the terrain features around the target area. "Sir, what about airstrikes? A couple of precision munitions could eliminate the problem without risking ground forces." "That was our first option, but intelligence indicates that there are civilians in the compound, including women and children. The rules of engagement don't permit airstrikes when civilian casualties are likely." Major Thompson turned his attention to Maria. "Staff Sergeant Santos, I understand you have specialized capabilities that might be relevant to this situation." Maria had been expecting this moment since the firefight at Carez. Her demonstrated marksmanship skills and the classified aspects of her training made her a potential asset for missions that conventional forces couldn't accomplish. But she also understood the implications of what was being suggested. "Sir, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking if it would be possible to eliminate the target using precision fires from a distance that would minimize risk to both our forces and any civilians present." Major Thompson's tone was careful, professional. "This would be a voluntary mission, and you would have full support from Alpha Company and any other resources we can provide." Maria considered the tactical situation carefully. The compound was positioned on high ground, but there were several ridgelines in the area that could provide firing positions at ranges where her specialized weapon system would be effective. The challenge would be getting into position without being detected, identifying the correct target among multiple individuals present at the compound, and making the shot under field conditions that would be far more demanding than anything she had faced at Keres. Sir, I would need detailed intelligence on the target's appearance and behavior patterns, current weather and atmospheric conditions for the target area, and a team capable of providing security and extraction if the mission goes wrong. All of that can be arranged, Major Thompson replied. The question is whether you're willing to accept the mission. Maria looked around the room, noting the expressions of the officers and NCOs who were witnessing this conversation. They were asking her to move beyond her role as a unit medic and function essentially as a special operations sniper, taking on a mission that would have been assigned to specialized units under normal circumstances. Sir, I'll need to study the intelligence and conduct a detailed mission analysis before I can give you a definitive answer. But based on what I've seen so far, it appears to be within my capabilities. Over the next several hours, Maria immersed herself in mission planning with an intensity that impressed even the experienced officers around her. She studied topographical maps, weather forecasts, aerial reconnaissance photographs, and detailed intelligence reports on the target's known habits and appearance. Her analysis was thorough and professional, incorporating factors that demonstrated training far beyond what most soldiers received. The plan that emerged was complex, but achievable. Maria would infiltrate to a ridge position approximately 800 meters from the target compound, using night movement to avoid detection. She would establish an observation post and wait for the target to present himself in a way that allowed for positive identification and a clear shot. Alpha Company would provide security and extraction support, positioned to respond if the mission was compromised. Captain Johnson assembled Alpha Company's leadership for a detailed briefing on their supporting role in the operation. The mission would require unprecedented coordination between conventional infantry and specialized precision fires, stretching the unit's capabilities in new directions. I want everyone to understand what we're dealing with here, Johnson told his NCOs. This isn't a standard combat mission. We're supporting a precision elimination operation that requires surgical accuracy and perfect timing. Sergeant Santos will be in an extremely exposed position, and if things go wrong, we need to be ready to extract her under fire. Lieutenant Rodriguez raised his hand. Sir, what about rules of engagement? Are we cleared to engage any threats in the target area? Our primary mission is force protection and extraction support. We're authorized to engage any hostile forces that threaten the mission or our personnel. But remember, this is a precision operation in an area with confirmed civilian presence. Discrimination and proportionality are critical. Sergeant Mitchell had been quiet during most of the briefing, but Maria could see that he had concerns about the mission. After the formal briefing ended, he approached her privately. Santos, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Are you ready for this? I'm not questioning your shooting ability. We all saw what you can do. But this is different from defending against an attack. This is a deliberate elimination mission, and there's no going back once you pull that trigger. Maria appreciated Mitchell's concern. The sergeant was asking about the psychological aspects of the mission, the difference between defensive actions and offensive elimination operations. It was a distinction that mattered enormously to soldiers who had to live with the consequences of their actions. Sergeant, I've been trained for missions like this. I understand the moral and psychological implications, and I've made peace with what might be required. The target is directly responsible for the deaths of American and Afghan forces. Eliminating him will save lives and potentially prevent future attacks. Mitchell nodded slowly. All right, just remember that we're all in this together. You don't have to carry the weight of this mission alone. The infiltration began at 2,200 hours, with Alpha Company moving out from FOB Hammer under cover of darkness. They used night vision equipment and moved in tactical formation through terrain that was familiar after months of patrol operations. Maria carried her specialized weapon system along with her standard medical kit, prepared to function in either capacity as the mission required. The movement to the target area took 4 hours, with the team navigating through valleys and along ridge lines to avoid Taliban observation posts and patrol routes. Maria's conditioning proved excellent, as she kept pace with the infantry soldiers while carrying additional equipment that would be critical to mission success. By 0300 hours, Alpha Company had established positions that provided both security for Maria's firing point and rapid extraction routes if the mission was compromised. Maria moved the final 800 meters to her shooting position alone, using natural terrain features to mask her movement from any observers in the target compound. The observation post she established provided an excellent view of the target area while offering concealment from enemy observation. Through her scope, Maria could see the compound clearly, noting the presence of multiple individuals and confirming the intelligence reports about defensive preparations. Several armed guards were visible, along with what appeared to be civilian family members. The waiting began at 0330 hours, with Maria maintaining continuous observation of the compound while Alpha Company monitored their security positions. Intelligence suggested that the target typically emerged from the main building sometime between 0500 and 0600 hours for morning prayers, providing the best opportunity for positive identification and engagement. At 0547 hours, Maria observed a group of 3 men emerging from the compound's main building. Through her scope, she could compare their faces and physical characteristics to the detailed intelligence photographs she had studied. The second man matched the target profile perfectly, the right height, facial features, and clothing described in the intelligence reports. Alpha 6, this is Overwatch, Maria whispered into her radio using the code names established for the mission. I have positive identification of the target. Request permission to engage. Captain Johnson's voice came back immediately. Overwatch, you are clear to engage. All stations, stand by for completion of mission. The crosshairs settled on the target as Maria controlled her breathing and applied the marksmanship fundamentals that had been drilled into her during countless hours of training. The range was 847 meters according to her laser range finder, with a slight crosswind that required minimal compensation. Atmospheric conditions were ideal, with clear air and stable temperature. The shot broke cleanly, and Maria watched through her scope as the target dropped immediately. The other individuals around him dove for cover, confusion and panic evident in their movements. Maria had achieved her objective with a single, precise shot that eliminated the target while avoiding harm to any civilians or other personnel in the area. Alpha 6, target is down. Mission complete, Maria reported, already beginning to pack her equipment for rapid extraction. Roger, Overwatch. All stations begin extraction immediately. The withdrawal from the target area proceeded smoothly, with Alpha Company providing overwatch as Maria moved back to the rally point. There were no signs of pursuit or immediate enemy response, suggesting that the Taliban forces in the area were still trying to understand what had happened at the compound. By 0800 hours, Alpha Company had returned to FOB Hammer, where Major Thompson was waiting for a detailed mission debrief. The operation had accomplished its objective without casualties or compromise, eliminating a high-value target who had been responsible for numerous attacks on coalition forces. Outstanding work, all of you, Major Thompson told the assembled soldiers. This mission demonstrates the kind of capabilities that can make a significant difference in our overall campaign effectiveness. But as Maria cleaned her weapon and completed her after-action reports, she understood that the successful mission would inevitably lead to requests for similar operations. Her unique combination of medical training and specialized combat skills made her valuable for missions that conventional forces couldn't accomplish, and higher command levels would want to exploit those capabilities. The question now was how many more missions like this she would be asked to undertake, and whether she could maintain her primary identity as a medic while taking on increasingly complex special operations tasks. The mountains of Afghanistan held many more high-value targets, and Maria Santos had proven that she could reach them with surgical precision. 6 months after the successful elimination mission in the Karengal Valley, Maria Santos found herself facing a situation that would define not only the remainder of her deployment, but her entire military career. The call came at 0347 hours, jolting her awake in her quarters at Forward Operating Base Hammer with the kind of urgent summons that meant lives hung in the balance. Captain Johnson's voice carried the strain of a commander dealing with multiple crises simultaneously. "Santos, we need you in the TOC immediately. We have a developing situation that requires both your medical expertise and your specialized capabilities." The Tactical Operations Center was buzzing with activity when Maria arrived, with officers and NCOs clustered around communication equipment and digital displays showing real-time intelligence feeds. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the urgency that came with time-critical operations involving American lives. Colonel Martinez, the battalion commander, was present along with several officers Maria didn't recognize. Their uniforms and bearings suggested special operations backgrounds. The presence of such high-ranking personnel indicated that whatever was happening extended far beyond routine combat operations. "Staff Sergeant Santos, we have a situation involving a downed aircraft and potential hostage scenario." Colonel Martinez began without preamble. A special operations helicopter conducting a classified mission was shot down approximately 18 kilometers northeast of here. "We have confirmed survivors, but they're trapped in an area controlled by a Taliban cell known for executing captured American personnel." Maria studied the tactical display showing the crash site location, noting the challenging terrain and the distance from friendly forces. The downed aircraft had come to rest in a narrow valley surrounded by ridgelines that provided excellent defensive positions for enemy forces while limiting approach routes for rescue operations. "Sir, what's the timeline for potential rescue operations?" "That's the problem," one of the special operations officers interjected. "Intelligence intercepts suggest that the Taliban unit holding the survivors plans to move them to a more secure location within the next 12 hours. If that happens, we may lose any chance of recovery." Colonel Martinez activated a secure communication link, and the voice of a special operations pilot crackled through the speakers. The man was clearly injured, his breathing labored, but his report was professional and detailed. "We have 3 survivors from the aircraft crew, including myself. 1 crew member was killed in the crash, and another died from injuries sustained during the impact. We're currently hidden in a cave system approximately 200 meters from the crash site, but enemy forces are conducting systematic searches of the area." The pilot's voice continued, describing the tactical situation with the calm professionalism that came from elite training. "I can see at least 15 enemy fighters, possibly more. They've established observation posts on the surrounding ridgelines and are using the crashed aircraft as bait, expecting rescue operations." Maria absorbed this information while studying detailed topographical maps of the crash site area. The terrain was some of the most challenging in the region, with steep approaches, limited cover, and multiple choke points that would make conventional rescue operations extremely difficult. "Sir, what are our options?" she asked. Colonel Martinez exchanged glances with the special operations officers before responding. "Conventional rescue operations would require significant resources and would likely result in heavy casualties. Air support is limited due to weather conditions and the risk of friendly fire with survivors in the immediate area." Captain Johnson leaned forward. "Santos, we're looking at a situation where your unique capabilities might provide options that conventional forces don't have. The crash site is within range of several potential firing positions, and there may be opportunities to eliminate key enemy personnel who are preventing rescue operations." Maria understood the implications immediately. They were asking her to function essentially as a special operations sniper, using precision fires to create opportunities for successful rescue operations. It would be her most challenging mission yet, with American lives directly dependent on her performance. "Sir, I'll need detailed intelligence on enemy positions, current weather conditions, and coordination with whatever rescue elements will be employed. All of that is being prepared, the Special Operations Officer replied. We're developing a comprehensive plan that uses your precision fire capabilities to eliminate key threats while conventional forces conduct the actual extraction. Over the next several hours, Maria found herself at the center of mission planning that brought together resources from multiple units and command levels. The operation would require unprecedented coordination between conventional infantry, special operations forces, and her specialized precision fire support. The plan that emerged was complex but feasible. Maria would infiltrate to a ridge position overlooking the crash site, establish observation, and systematically eliminate Taliban fighters who pose the greatest threat to rescue operations. Alpha Company would provide security and support, while a special operations team would conduct the actual extraction of the survivors. The briefing for Alpha Company took place in the secure conference room, with every member of the unit present. Captain Johnson's expression was serious as he outlined their role in what would be their most important mission of the deployment. People, we're supporting a personnel recovery operation involving special operations personnel trapped behind enemy lines. This is a time-critical mission with no room for error. Johnson pointed to the tactical display showing the crash site and surrounding terrain. Sergeant Santos will provide precision fire support to eliminate key threats, while we maintain security and provide extraction support if needed. Sergeant Mitchell raised his hand. Sir, what's the enemy's strength in the target area? Intelligence estimates 15 to 20 Taliban fighters, well-armed and positioned to defend against rescue attempts. Some may be foreign fighters with advanced military training. Johnson's tone was grave. This won't be like the firefights we've been in before. These people know we're coming, and they're prepared for us. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked concerned about the mission timeline. Sir, how long do we have to complete the operation? The survivors have to be extracted within the next 8 hours, or intelligence suggests they'll be moved to a location where rescue becomes impossible. As Alpha Company prepared their equipment and conducted final mission briefing, Maria found herself reflecting on how dramatically her role had evolved since arriving in Afghanistan. She had deployed as a combat medic, expecting to save lives through medical treatment and emergency care. Now she was preparing for a mission that would require her to function as a precision marksman supporting special operations, with American lives directly dependent on her shooting accuracy. Private Williams, now fully recovered from his leg wound and serving as her security partner, approached her during final preparations. Doc, you ready for this? As ready as I can be, Maria replied, checking her specialized weapons system one final time. Just remember that if things go wrong out there, our primary job is to make sure those survivors make it home. The infiltration to the target area began at 1,400 hours, with Maria and a small security team moving through terrain that challenged even their experienced mountain warfare skills. The approach to her firing position required them to navigate steep ridgelines while avoiding Taliban observation posts and patrol routes. By 1,800 hours, Maria had established her high position on a ridge overlooking the crash site valley. Through her scope, she could see the wreckage of the Special Operations helicopter and the evidence of systematic searches being conducted by Taliban fighters. The enemy had established a disciplined perimeter with overlapping fields of fire and mutually supporting positions. Alpha 6, this is Overwatch, Maria whispered into her radio. I have visual contact with the target area, counting 16 enemy personnel in prepared positions around the crash site. Captain Johnson's voice came back immediately. Roger, Overwatch. Special operations elements are moving into position for the extraction attempt. Stand by for fire mission. Through her scope, Maria began identifying priority targets among the Taliban fighters. The enemy commander was clearly visible, directing the search operations from a position that provided him excellent observation of the entire valley. Eliminating him would disrupt their coordination and create confusion that the rescue team could exploit. At 1847 hours, the Special Operations Team reported that they were in position and ready to begin the extraction attempt. The plan called for Maria to eliminate key enemy personnel at precisely timed intervals, creating windows of opportunity for the rescue team to advance toward the survivor's position. "Overwatch, you are clear to engage Target 1 on my command," came the voice of the Special Operations Team leader. Maria settled her crosshairs on the Taliban commander, a bearded man who had been coordinating the search operations throughout the afternoon. The range was 742 meters with atmospheric conditions that were acceptable but not ideal due to variable winds in the valley. Execute, execute, execute. The shot broke cleanly, and Maria watched the Taliban commander drop immediately. The effect on his fighters was instant and dramatic. The organized search pattern dissolved into confusion as individual fighters looked for threats while trying to understand what had happened to their leader. Target 1 down. Special Operations Team is moving. Over the next 90 minutes, Maria systematically eliminated 7 Taliban fighters, each shot timed to support specific phases of the rescue operation. Her precision fires created confusion and gaps in the enemy perimeter that allowed the Special Operations Team to approach the survivor's position undetected. The extraction of the 3 surviving aircrew members proceeded flawlessly, with the rescue team reaching their position and beginning withdrawal toward friendly lines. But as they moved through the valley, Taliban reinforcements arrived from neighboring areas, threatening to overwhelm the rescue operation with superior numbers. Alpha 6, this is Special Operations Team Leader. We have additional enemy forces moving into the area from the north and east. Request all available fire support. This was the moment Maria had trained for, but hoped never to face. A situation where multiple American lives depended entirely on her ability to engage numerous targets under extreme time pressure. The reinforcing Taliban fighters were moving in small groups, using the terrain for cover while trying to intercept the rescue team's withdrawal route. Working with mechanical precision, Maria engaged target after target, her shooting rhythm steady and deliberate. Each shot had to count, as there was no margin for error with friendly forces operating in close proximity to enemy positions. She fired 18 rounds over the course of 23 minutes, eliminating 11 enemy fighters and forcing the others to seek cover that delayed their advance. Alpha 6, this is Special Ops. We have reached friendly lines with all survivors. Mission complete. As Maria heard those words, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't fully realized was there. The 3 aircrew members were safe, extracted successfully despite being surrounded by superior enemy forces in extremely challenging terrain. Her precision fire support had been instrumental in making the rescue possible. The return journey to forward operating base Hammer was subdued, with Alpha Company understanding that they had participated in something exceptional. Word of the successful rescue operation spread quickly through the base, with soldiers recognizing that their medic had once again demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything they had imagined possible. Colonel Martinez was waiting when they returned, his expression reflecting both relief at the mission's success and recognition of its broader implications. Staff Sergeant Santos, that was outstanding work. The aircrew you helped save today includes personnel whose loss would have been a significant blow to ongoing special operations in this theater. But as Maria cleaned her weapon and completed her after-action reports, she understood that today's mission represented a turning point in her military career. She had proven herself capable of supporting special operations at the highest levels, functioning effectively as a precision marksman in scenarios that challenged even elite units. The question now was what would come next. The successful completion of increasingly complex missions had demonstrated capabilities that made her valuable to commanders far above her current unit level. There would inevitably be requests for her to take on assignments that would move her beyond Alpha Company and into specialized roles that fully utilized her unique skill set. As she sat in her quarters that night, surrounded by the familiar sounds of forward operating base Hammer, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had deployed as a combat medic committed to saving lives through medical care. She was ending her deployment as something unprecedented, a warrior healer whose capabilities spanned both the art of preserving life and the science of taking it when necessary. The mountains of Afghanistan had tested every aspect of her training and revealed capabilities she had hoped never to need. But in proving herself capable of meeting every challenge presented to her, Maria Santos had also proven that the boundaries between healer and warrior, between saving lives and taking them, were more fluid than anyone had imagined. She remained, above all, a soldier committed to bringing her fellow warriors home safely, regardless of what methods that commitment required. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, and new tests of her ever-expanding capabilities. But tonight, 3 aircrew members were alive because of her skills, and Alpha Company had once again demonstrated that they could accomplish any mission assigned to them. In the end, that was all that mattered to Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, keeping her fellow soldiers alive and bringing them home.